Hello and welcome to this Euractiv discussion together with Life Terra online. We are going to be talking about the EU Forestry Strategy 2030. I'm your host Jennifer Baker and I'll be guiding you through our questions today. And of course, remember, you can share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag EADebates. Now, the EU Forestry Strategy for 2030 is, of course, a key component of the European Green Deal and is aimed at protecting, restoring and increasing the resilience of forests across the EU as they serve a vital purpose in our lives as carbon sinks, as well as preserving biodiversity and supporting ecosystems. So today, we will talk about sustainable forestry management, increasing forest size and, of course, forestry, as it's very timely at the moment as it's currently under review by the European Parliament, and we are looking at the introduction of possible EU forest monitoring, reporting and data collection, all hugely important elements. We'll start today with some opening remarks and then we'll move into our panel discussion, and do remember you can send your questions using the function on your screen. So, you can also join the debate by going to slido.com on your browser or by scanning the QR code that you can see there on the screen in front of you. And we do welcome all your thoughts and comments and questions to our panel. But we'll open up today by introducing Sven Kallen, who is the founder of the Life Terra Foundation, Europe's largest climate action initiative around tree planting. Life Terra is currently planting trees in 30 European countries, so even beyond the EU, and together with its partners have so far planted 15 million trees. But to tell us more, I'm going to hand over the floor, Sven, to you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and pleasure to be here. Thanks to the Euractiv team for organizing, and of course all the other panelists. Yes, we are on a mission to plant many millions of trees. Our long-term goal is to plant 500 million trees as a symbolic one tree for each European. We are now at 15, so you can imagine the task that it takes. We've been 5 years into this project, and to enable land access, permits, provisioning, to find enough funds and volunteers to plant all these trees, it is quite a task. We're not only focusing on tree planting. For us, trees are an important symbol for awareness of climate needs and climate action. And so we also do dedicate a lot of time to education. We have what is called Terra Mission, which is a free of charge education package for 8 to 12-year-olds that helps them to gain knowledge about energy transition, about circular economy, lots of things have to do with sustainability, and of course also about climate action and planting trees. We are co-financed by the European Commission through the LIFE program, which is important. That is finishing this year, this actually at the end of June, and then we will continue as a foundation to plant many more millions of trees in the coming years. We are now currently present in 30 countries and growing. We are still missing Austria and Switzerland, where we'll be planting next week, and we have waiting for the snow to melt. In the Nordics, we're going to be planting still in Denmark and in Finland in the coming weeks as well. So by that, we have almost full European coverage. And that is a fantastic achievement, I would say, for a project that's just 5 years old. We're not only focused on trees, as I said. Apart from education, we also do a lot on monitoring, on carbon removals and nature-based solutions in order to really take an integral approach to ecosystem restoration. And I think that is where a lot of our partners are also going. So moving from just planting trees to really taking an integral look at what is the problem here and how can we restore this in long-term, with a long-term view and a long-term success. We're very actively in registering trees. So we have a geolocalization tool, and all those trees are also reported, not just from our trees, but also from our partners at the 3 billion tree planting platform that is part of the 3 billion tree goal as part of the Green Deal. Finally, I think it would be interesting to mention that we launched just last year the first edition of the European Tree Planting Day initiative, which is basically a platform to give more visibility and attention to the fact that there are so many tree planting organizations in Europe. So we try to unite them, and altogether we're in the first edition, without a lot of marketing, but a lot of friends that wanted to come on this initiative. We involved 45 organizations from 19 countries, organizing more than 400 events and planting almost 250,000 trees. So you see that there's a lot of stuff happening, and we hope to, for the second edition that's starting coming November, we hope to double that, and so to spread this word and climate action around Europe. Those are sort of the short introduction of what Life Terra is doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sven. Indeed, some sterling work going on there. And we're going to take the bent now a little bit more in the direction of policy. And so I'm very pleased to welcome to our panel discussion Thomas Waits, MEP, who is on the Agri Committee in the European Parliament. Kelsey Perlman is Forest and Climate Campaigner at Fern. And Juha Jumpanen is Executive Vice President of Wood Supply and Forest Services at Metso Group. And of course, Sven, you're staying on to discuss with us as well. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thomas, if I may start with you, give us your perspective on where we are. We're around about the halfway stage on the EU forestry policy, as Sven said. What's happening? Where is it succeeding? Where is it falling short? Give me your opening thoughts to set the scene.
Well, hi everyone, and thanks for having me on this show. Well, where are we? I mean, forest strategy is a strategy. It's not a directive. It's not an European law. It's more or less a declaration of intention. I would say the best result this has brought up to now is that we're debating about forests, and we're debating about the impact forests have on our daily life, on our water supply, on the air we breathe, on the biodiversity that is surrounding us, but also especially on climate. Because you see, I mean, the whole society is trying to reduce emissions. There's very few areas in our society that actually have the capacity to re-extract CO2 from the atmosphere and rebind it into the soil, so-called sequestration of CO2 into the soil. And here forestry has to play a huge role, also agriculture, but even more forestry. The point is that the legislation that should follow on the so-called forest strategy is lacking behind, or it's even if we're discussing some of the things like forest monitoring in the European Parliament now, it is actually facing fierce resistance, especially from Scandinavian countries, unfortunately, also from my own country, Austria, or at least let's say from the representatives that represent Austria in the moment, and with the argument, well, forestry is a solely national competence. EU has nothing to do with it, so don't interfere into that business. While that is not really true, I mean, there's a court verdict from 2015 from the European Court of Justice that clarifies that forests are a mixed competence. Yes, the pure economic questions on running forests, that's a national competence, but everything that is related with climate, with environment, this is all European competence. And so now we're trying to actually push through a legislation that allows us to surveil, to actually see what is going on in European forests and to compare this with other countries and to compare this with the data. Many countries, especially from Western Europe, have established forest monitoring systems, but they are not always comparable with each other. Luckily, we also have new technology like the satellite Copernicus, where we can actually use this technology very well to see from above in which state our forests are. This is it's urgent to do so because unfortunately in many of our countries forests are not anymore enhancing in their quality towards biodiversity, but also in their quality towards actual sequestration of CO2 into the soil. Some of our forests have even become active emitters, which is a result of climate change, global warming, but also of, I would say, wrong maintenance of forestry and a wrong understanding what actually sustainable forest management means. And yes, a positive, to end with a positive note, there's some positive developments. Now there's a new definition of what actually is sustainable forest management. Originally, when this term was developed, it just meant you do a clear cut and you plant some trees after that. While I must say, I wouldn't consider it tree planting in the sense that the speaker before was presenting it to plant after a clear cut, because you shouldn't do a clear cut anyhow, but that's my position. The second positive thing is that we now see the Commission working on a closer to nature definition, and this is covering a lot of forests in the European Union that are maintained in a close to nature way, that are used, but you have mixed age, mixed species, natural regrowth, a very high number of biodiversity, different species, plants and animals, and also a quite good revenue for the foresters, but this is maybe something we could go into later. So we're somewhere trying to get legislation done based on this forest strategy, but in the moment it's really, really difficult. We even have some amendments that want to push back on the legislation as a whole when it comes to forest monitoring. So, it's quite difficult times for ambitious forest policy here in the European Parliament.
Well, thank you very much for setting that. We may, hopefully, if we have time, come back to some of those points. And I may ask you, as I know you're an expert, on possibly the intersection between farming and forest, because I know that's something you can talk about. Kelsey, let me come to you. Tell us a bit about Fern. What are you doing? What are you working on? And what's your position?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the invitation. So Fern is an organization that operates at the EU level. We work with forested NGOs, we work with academics, we work with foresters, and we were striving and continue to strive to achieve many of the objectives that were outlined in the forest strategy. So we followed many of the initiatives that are mentioned under the forest strategy. And I have to say, compared to the forest strategy that existed in 2020, we were very excited about this upcoming forest strategy with this idea that we were going to increase the resilience of European forests. And our understanding of that is you need to have diverse forests, you need to move away from monocultures, you need to support the variety of management practices, as well as species, as well as wood industries that are out there to be able to operate within sustainable limits. And so underneath that, there were a handful of policies and initiatives that came forward under the forest strategy. And I think that we see overall that we're losing momentum. Of course, we were very excited about the nature restoration law coming forward, which just barely got itself over the finish line. But next to that, now we're talking about something that's even a step back from that. Can we monitor our forests? And today we find that it's almost impossible to have a discussion about furthering the information base around our forests. For us, that's quite shocking to see that just a conversation about data suddenly becomes very secretive. There's a lot of worry when in many other sectors, whether it's climate, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, we see that sharing of information is the basis upon which you improve innovation, you improve services. We do it for the health of ourselves. Why would we not do it for the health of our forests? So for as diverse as many actors argue our forests are, the diversity of practices that were offered under the forest strategy do not seem to be delivering because we have this block of politicians, of industry that does not want to see the dial moved forward on actually letting flourish the variety of practices that can happen under the forestry sector. So in terms of regulation, many were already mentioned, but the other that I would like to emphasize is the protection of primary and old growth forests, where we know the majority are in Finland, Sweden. You also have many in Eastern Europe. Many might have seen a report that came out from WWF just a few weeks ago that showed thousands of hectares of primary and old growth forests are being logged annually in Sweden. Many countries know where these forests are, and yet we're still losing them in droves. Obviously knowing that this is one of the remaining hotspots of biodiversity that we have, and it was one of the objectives of the forest strategy, and it does not seem like we're moving closer to this very key initiative in terms of protecting forest resilience. The one that I also want to end on is financial. We talked a lot about being able to get funding to the people who can end up making the change, whether that's park managers or forest owners. There should be a variety of funds that are around to be able to increase the resilience of our forests. And what we're seeing is there is a lot of money that is available, whether it's under the CAP, whether it's under different financial programs that are organized by member states. And yet in many of the interviews that we've done, we've seen that those who are already undertaking the right practices are seeing significant barriers, and they're not seeing the financial incentives that were promised to be able to undertake better practices. So I would say that the strategy remains an ambitious strategy, but we're losing momentum, and we are really squandering a lot of the opportunities that are there in the strategy as it's written.
Thank you. And let me hear now, Juha, from you. Tell us about the work you're doing and your position as well.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. So Metsä Group is a Finnish forest industry company which operates in the international markets. And what makes us unique is our ownership. So we are owned by 90,000 Finnish forest owners, and our owner members own half of private forests in Finland. Our business areas cover the whole value chain from the forest to consumers, and this means that all the wood we procure, we use 100% efficiently in the different stages of the wood value chain according to the cascade use principle. And actually, in addition, we use industrial side streams efficiently. And we are making products that people all over the world use daily. And our products can replace, of course, fossil-based materials. And so we can be definitely the solution for these challenges what we are having at the moment. And as a Metsä Group, we are really committed on regenerative forestry principles, which mean that we manage forests in a way that improves the state of forest nature for future generations. So that is very important for us. And what comes to the EU forest strategy, I think it gives the sector a long-term view on forest-related policies. And during the previous mandate, a lot of new legislation affecting forests were introduced. And I think now it's extremely important to allow sufficient time for proper implementation. And I think that the forest strategy should have a holistic approach. So all ecosystem services have to be recognized in it. And current forest strategy is an ambitious action plan, and many of its ideas have resulted into legislative proposals or guidelines. And I think that forest strategy paves the way to initiatives, and thus it should be made in a constructive manner with strategic dialogue with stakeholders. So we need to bear in mind that one size does not fit all. So European forests have a great variety due to different vegetation zones and climate, and it's important that the strategic goals are adapted to regional conditions. And considering current political situation, I think that forest role as a valuable and strategic raw material should be recognized better because forest enhances EU's resilience and security of supply. So we have to actively help forests to adapt to the changing climate so that they continue to provide people the many ecosystem services we depend on, from raw material to clean water and recreational opportunities, etc. And for us, it's really important that we are going forward with our regenerative forestry principles, and our goal is to verifiably strengthen the state of the forest nature by 2030s by our own acts. So EU can support the transition towards regenerative forestry, and regenerative forestry means strengthening the value of nature capital together with economic value generated by forests. And practical measures include, for instance, utilizing native tree species, diversification of tree species, increasing the number of old trees and decayed wood, diversification of structural features, protection of valuable habitats, and etc., etc. And maybe what comes to the highlights of EU forest strategy, I would like to highlight guidelines for defining, mapping, monitoring, and protecting primary and old growth forests, which I see highly important. And actually, our government in Finland made historical decision last week to protect all state-owned old growth forests, and area can be up to 90,000 hectares. And what has fallen short, maybe the strategy does not recognize the economic value of forests as well as it could. So I think that all three pillars of sustainability should be taken into account and should be in balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Sven, to come back to you, you've heard the differing positions that people have set out. And of course, you gave us a lowdown on the work that Terra is doing at the beginning. But tell me now some of your reaction regarding the EU forestry strategy to 2030, which is, let's remember, only 5 years away, which is a microsecond in the life of a forest.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, I was listening to the panelists, and of course, we are the guys on the ground. We are not professional foresters as such. We are an organization that is organizing tree planting events in which we try to involve as many volunteers, schools, companies, all kind of actors from society to get engaged with tree planting. So, of course, it's difficult to compare these type of initiatives with large-scale landowners, like, for example, are in Finland or in other countries in Europe that plant millions of trees in their daily operations. What we do see is that overall, even though maybe the final objective to the 3 billion, which was sort of coined as a strategy, you know, that is an important number to reach that number of new trees. What I think the whole debate on forest strategy and biodiversity strategy 2030, let's not forget that one, have made very clear to all the actors is that it is no longer smart. It's no longer not only allowed legally, but also smart to plant monocultures. The climate is changing so fast, and we see that, and we're replanting from Lisbon to Helsinki and from Dublin to Bucharest. And so we see in a lot of these countries incredibly fast changes, and native species that are having a lot of trouble, that have difficulties to survive and to flourish. And so this whole impact on the need for more climate adapted species and also the diversity is becoming more and more important. But people actually, through all this strategy and the, let's say, the different legislative packages around that, have really made it clear for people that we have to diversify. We have to do this differently, like we did it maybe 50 or 40 years ago. So I think that is a very important impulse. And if we then reach the final number or not, I think if the whole sector is moving towards more resiliency, as they call it, towards all these impacts that are facing us, not just climate extremes, but also diseases, bugs that are coming, unexpected bugs that are coming through all the global trade. I think that's a positive change in order to improve the quality of our forests in the long term. And so that's my hope, that at least we're moving in that direction. Yeah, something else is, of course, that national governments, I mean, we find a lot of difficulties sometimes. We have funding available to do projects to go from 100 hectares to 200 hectares. I know that in forestry terms, sometimes that's considered small, but we still have a problem with finding the land, with finding the permits, with getting such a project organized. So there's still quite a few barriers on the ground, let's say, in order to scale this. But the general debate about, like I said, resiliency and diversity, at least, is a positive step in the right direction for us.
Thank you. Thomas, you said in your introduction that it's a difficult time in the European Parliament for forests, but let's zoom out a little bit and talk about member states. Have they aligned their efforts, or are there still significant disparities in implementation? And if you've got any insight into which countries are most successful or why they are, that would be very useful for us.
Well, yeah, thank you for this question. I didn't mention I'm an organic farmer in the south of Austria. I'm a mountain farmer. It's a mixed farm. I grew my children mainly with forest goods, so with wood from the forests. I run a very small sawmill with my neighbors, just a very local, small little enterprise for direct marketing of the produce of my forest, and just, you know, where I'm coming from. And indeed, the situations in different member states are really very diverging from each other. Let me mention one that is my neighboring state, Slovenia, as I would say the absolute front runner. Slovenia is a country that has a forest law already since 80, 90 years that is based on natural regrowth, natural recreation, on mixed species, mixed aged forests, and no clear cuts, only in exemptions. And you can see the whole country how biodiversity is working there, but also how the income of forest owners is at a very high level compared to other countries in the region. Because at the end of the day, if you work with nature and if you work with the natural cycles in the forest and with the natural capabilities that a forest can actually provide us, you can actually harvest quite a nice amount of wood while still respecting all the natural needs that what you mentioned, it constant cover of the land, mixed species and so on. So there's very good techniques, and a lot of farmers are doing it actually. The colleague from Finland mentioned that they have organized private landowners. A private landowner is not automatically a farmer. In our region, the majority of the forests are actually run by farmers and in rather small scale pitches of forest. And this, I must say, looks much better in days today when we're facing all the impacts of global warming and climate change. But what actually the Fern was saying is that what is happening, and once again what is happening in the European Union, is that we're providing financial incentives to the wrongdoers. So we're giving the people that were actually clear cutting the natural forests and replanting them with monocultures. In our case, with spruce. In the case of Spain, it might be eucalyptus. In other countries, other species, populus or so. But they have been cutting it down, planting monocultures, and now they are facing all the impacts of global warming, bark beetle infections, droughts, extreme wind events, and so on. And they now have catastrophic outcomes of their forestry policy. And now we're putting taxpayers' money onto these forest owners to change practices. While the ones that were always doing the right thing and that were always protecting the natural ability of forests to be resilient also towards climate, to provide clean water, and so on, again, have difficulties to somehow get any rewards for what they're actually doing. And I think there really is a point in this that we have to look at. Then in countries like Germany, we're facing the problem that more and more forests are actually dying because of drought and the lack of water. In Scandinavia, we have, many of what you call forests in Scandinavia. Many of these areas I wouldn't call forests, it's plantations. That's something different than a forest. I can show this with some examples if you want to. But it's great if you start to replant also other species. But in case of other species, also one important point for the foresters across the European Union is also what the market is demanding. And the reality is that in Finland and Scandinavia and Austria and Slovenia, the market is mainly demanding needlewood. So spruce, sometimes fir, sometimes pine, also in Spain, pine. And this also, is a massive driver into the sector to go for monoculture plantations or for 90% one species plantations. And we have to see that we need to invest also into the value chain of leaf woods, because only if it's commercially viable also to plant leaf wood, and if you can make an income on this, at the end of the day, farmers will do it, foresters will do it, the forest industry will do it. So we need to invest into development of more products that are actually using leaf wood. And so there's a lot of market development that needs to be done, and we shouldn't underestimate that. Last but not least, let me say two things. If you do the right way of forestry, you're sequestering a lot of CO2. How can we make these forest owners eligible for money from ETS, so for CO2 sequestration funds that are paid by industry for pollution? And second, this question on nature credits. This is discussed in the moment in the European Parliament, but it's not yet clear what should that actually be. How should the criteria be? What kind of money will this be paid of? Because the funds in the moment are rather shrinking than growing on the agriculture side, but also on the nature protection side. So another obstacle that we have here, where does this money come from that we want to reward the right doers from?
Thomas, just a quick follow-up while we're on this subject, because I see a question from our audience, from Eliska Tiankova to you, asking what, in your opinion, can be done to bring the diverging perspectives of the Commission and Member States closer together?
Well, I thought, this is what I thought, that we really go into the data, into the scientific basis, acknowledging that without proper forest management, we will not be able to reach our climate goals, and also to realize that if we do not substantially invest into the resilience of our forests, also in the mid and long term, the economic revenues from our forestry, next to all the biodiversity and climate questions, that will be at stake. Because what we see in the moment in countries, in my own country, Austria, but in many regions of the European Union, is that forests are affected by massive, as I said, bark beetle infections, or extreme weather events. And this is more and more also compromising also the economic side of the forestry sector in the European Union. And this is, I don't know, just in my home country, Austria, it's 100,000 workplaces depending on it. I don't have the numbers by heart now for the European Union. So we should really get away from this short-term income perspective. How can I make the best money in the next 10 years? Or what worked best in the last century? But really look into the reality of scientific facts that we need to adapt our forests to the changing climate. Otherwise, we will not just face climatic problems, we will not just face problems with water, with biodiversity, but also very much economic problems for the farmers, for the landowners, for the foresters, and for the industry at the end of the day. I thought this is the basis that we're talking about, and that we find each other. In the moment, I'm not so sure, because what we see is that very right-wing forces in the European Parliament and center-right forces, they together try to, under the kind of narrative of less bureaucracy, less rules, deregulation, try to push back on any forward-looking and future-proof forest policy. But that battle is not yet over. I'm still hoping to call some of my colleagues and enough of my colleagues to reason.
Kelsey, same question to you. What can be done to bring diverging perspectives together? And also, if you can reflect on maybe the different positions of member states and where some are failing and some are succeeding.
Well, I think I would start from the point that I think Sven mentioned, which is we have to come to a collective realization that we can't manage the way that we've managed 50 years ago. And there are a few ways that we can show that. There's the positive way, where we can put forward those that are undertaking practices that are financially profitable, and at the same time are better for the forest, that are diversifying the different types of species that we have while also producing wood. On the other hand, it's also quite important to realize the glut and the waste of the money that is being filtered into the old way of doing things. So we have examples in France where recovery funds are used to plant trees off the back of clear cuts instead of moving into a space where we can actually talk innovation, where we're trying to marry diverse forests with diverse products. So I do think that sticking with the science and sticking with the sustainable economics is something that can be helpful. Unfortunately, if we have many of the actors that are continuing to manage the old way, that have the ear of many of the governments, then we're just going to be delayed in this transition, in this move towards further innovation. And it's sad, because that means that we're effectively putting up obstacles to the modernization of this sector. And I think it's only the argumentation of showing what's wrong and showing the waste that will eventually get politicians to change their minds. So I do think that there's agreements to be had, but we need data to do that. And if we can't manage and we can't see where we're going, then it's very difficult to be able to move unless we start having more of these catastrophes, unless we start seeing that windstorms that come in Ireland are decimating the wood market for the foresters that are there. We will be moved by catastrophe if we're not moved by data. I mean, fortunately, we have the State of Europe's report, State of European Nature report that should be coming out at the end of this year. We had to wait 5 years to be able to see the trends and the direction that we're going, and this is way too late. So I would also argue for better information allows you to plan better, but then we need to overcome the roadblock of ideology, which we're facing currently in the European Parliament, to be able to get back on track to evidence-based policy where we're looking at the forests in front of us, we're seeing what's not working, and we're experimenting through offering incentives to do things better to achieve better outcomes in the forest. So we may be faced with a roadblock that moves us through catastrophe instead of through forward thinking.
Juha next. Juha, coming to you next. How have forest owners and managers and the broader forest industry, if you like, responded to the strategy? And are there sufficient financial incentives and support measures there to encourage them to adopt these more environmentally friendly practices? On mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Some kind of technical problem. So we have responded with our regenerative forestry strategy and related services, and forest owners have been really happy and positive on this. And actually, at our company, we have a so-called Metsä Group Plus management model. There we offer our owner members the opportunity to choose a higher level of nature management in connection to one single wood trade. And actually we are paying additional bonus to forest owner if one chooses Metsä Plus management model, and that additional bonus is substantial. So we are intensifying our owner members for better practices. And what comes to the state level approach, I would say that in Finland, forestry and silviculture has been developed based on research, and we have decades of experience on this. So I think that EU should rely on our expertise as well. And there has been a lot of talk about this continuous cover forestry, and I think that we must bear in mind that according researchers, it is not the silver bullet for all the forests. That's definitely clear. So we must bear in mind that we have different growth and light conditions in every country. So if something is working in one country, it doesn't guarantee that it will work on elsewhere. So that is clear. So if we would go for continuous cover forestry in Finland 100%, it would be very, very harmful for growth and carbon sequestration in Finnish forests. But of course, there are good places where we can practice continuous cover forestry. For instance, peatlands, and especially fertile peatlands. I think that we should only use continuous cover forestry in fertile peatlands, because we know, according research studies, that it is working great there. So maybe that is my view on this issue.
Thank you. I see we've got really quite a lot of questions coming in from people online, so I'll turn to some of those. Sven, I have a question specifically for you from Antonia Basilicata from the University of Freiburg, asking how you ensure that afforestation efforts prioritise ecological restoration rather than just increasing tree cover, particularly considering prevailing uncertainties due to climate change.
So that's a great question, thank you. Maybe before I go into that, I just wanted to very shortly touch on something that Thomas said that was in relationship to the payment for ecosystem services, as they call it, for the whole credit market. Maybe a glimmer of hope. As Life Terra, we are developing our first projects in Spain, Portugal, in France, Netherlands, that have been certified or are in the process of certifying, and that actually also met demand. So there are European companies, still, I know it is voluntary, but they're willing to invest in European ecosystem restoration projects to support them. And as a foundation, Life Terra, we give 50% of the income back to the landowner. So we pay for the investment, we help them realize it, and then everything that we can earn in the market, we give 50% back to the landowner as an incentive to stimulate that green economy and further improvement of those forests. So I think that's interesting. Obviously, we're not as far as, for example, just the other day, we were talking with people in Mexico, where Mexican companies are forced, they're obliged to compensate their impact in Mexico, in the Mexican nature restoration project. So I think this is something that currently maybe the winds are not favorable at the European political landscape, let's say, to make that happen. But it's kind of crazy that if companies have budget available for compensation, that they can invest it somewhere else and not in Europe, where they made that impact. So that would be a clear recommendation. Now, as to the question of the participant on resilience and long-term success. So we planned as Life Terra minimum of 6 species in each project to try to make it as diverse as possible. But in total, we have planted over 560 species, I think, in projects around Europe to increase that diversity, depending, of course, on the region in question, depending on the type of soil, depending on the purpose of the landowner. Is it long-term for wood production? Is it just for merely forest restoration? And then we also try to take into account the climate adaptiveness of species. So we see already, for example, in the Netherlands, where I'm from originally, that there's lots of different species are now being planted much more than before, due to ash dieback or other types of diseases. So other species now get priority who are more, let's say, resistant to long periods of droughts, for example, or can really deal with late frost. Those type of examples could lead to a new, let's say, new type of landscape, if you want, new forest landscape, but hopefully one that will resist and be thriving in the next 50 years. So, of course, we cannot look forward to the coming hundreds of years, what's going to happen, but we hope that we plant at least for the future and contribute to the debate there as well. And last point on that is that, of course, monitoring is very important. So we geolocalize the trees to know what was planted where and when, so we can add future monitoring information to that and provide like a very good database on what is happening to these species, how are they developing, and how can we learn from that to improve that even further into the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Kelsey, I think you wanted to come in on management practices, and I will have a follow-up question for you from our audience as well, but I'll let you weigh in first.
Trying to keep in my mind this question of who needs the money and what do we do? And I mean, maybe slightly away from my response directly to management, but it is the little guys with their forests that need to be able to have money to be able to change their practices and deal with any opportunity cost of what they might have been doing. There, I remain very, very skeptical of crediting approaches because frequently not a lot of money gets down to the people on the ground, as we say, as opposed to reforming the massive subsidies that we've talked about earlier. But the other thing that I want to mention is what do we do? I mean, we cannot turn our head away from the fact that clear cutting is currently the default practice in Europe. So we have 60 to 98% of forest management is clear cutting. If you look at countries like France, Finland, Ireland, Sweden, Spain, Portugal, most Eastern European countries, clear cutting is the default. And we know that this is not a silver bullet. And so when we talk about the alternatives, in my view, promoting any type of alternative is fantastic. I completely agree that continuous cover forestry cannot be applied in every single situation. There are some species that need clear areas and a lot of light to be able to grow, but we've clearly moved into an area of doing too much of one thing And it gets back to this this question that we have reduced the resilience. You get resilience through variety. You get resilience through a whole bunch of types of less intensive forestry. Continuous cover forestry is one of them. And so I think it's the call from my side is to be able to promote anything else. Really, I think that's the default that we are not currently achieving at the European Union level, and this is the problem that we need to keep square in the spotlight.
Well, Kelsey, I said I have a question online for you from Riccardo Gambini from BirdLife, asking if you agree with the JRC European Green Deal Progress Report that says that the EU is on track to meet the 2030 objective on protecting remaining old growth forests. What's your take on that report, if you can comment on it?
Yes, I think the expectation was legislation, and the expectation was that we would not be continuing to see thousands of hectares of old growth forest loss, which we're still seeing. So it becomes very, very hard to see those recommendations when you're looking at forests disappearing from one day to the next. I think there was an expectation of targets. There was an expectation of strictly protecting the remaining old growth forests. This hasn't happened. We've still seen losses of old growth forests in Sweden and Romania. We have documented cases of many NGOs on the ground that are shocked to see that despite these objectives that were put out in the forest strategy, we're still not seeing the reversal of this awful loss of the small remaining spots of biodiversity that we have in Europe. So until there is a mandate that we need to stop clearing these areas and that we need to move in the opposite direction and start growing, I mean, time will tell with the nature restoration law if we see the slowing of the destruction of these areas and eventually the restoration of areas that could be similar one day. But we have a long way to go to protect our remaining old growth and primary forests.
Thomas, same question to you. I mean, where do you see us on track for this 2030 objective of protecting old growth forests? I mean, the Joint Research Centre report says we're on track. Do you take that view?
No, I absolutely don't share that view. I can confirm what also Kelsey was mentioning about what is going on in Romania, and I must say I'm even a bit more, in this case, even radical when it comes to continuous cover and clear cut. I'm not as diplomatic as Kelsey is. I must say clear cut is not a solution to ordinary forestry at all, because you're uncovering the soil. This re-emits CO2 into the atmosphere. You have unprotected soil that is can be affected by droughts, but also by erosion, by heavy rain. We have more and more heavy rain, especially if this is not a flat area. Okay, Finland has lots of flat areas, but still, I mean, and there's no species that need clear cuts to grow. That's just not true. There's species that need more light and other species that need less light. But sorry, I am regrowing spruce naturally in my forests without clear cuts. And spruce is one of the trees you would like to plant that much, and that needs more light than others. Yes, in very remote mountainous areas, in very steep areas, you need to harvest bigger amount of wood so it's commercially viable. The main reason to do clear cuts is commercially. It's always commercial, cheap harvesting, because selective harvesting is more expensive. And this is what we need for old growth forests. And there's a bit of a problem there, because if you really run your forest in a very close to nature way, then you would consider this an old growth forest. And if you have an old growth forest where you do selective harvesting and take few trees here, few trees there, mostly of high value because it's old and thick trees. If you do selective harvesting, you can also run old growth forests in a commercial way, so they always stay old growth forests because you only harvest single or groups of old trees. And there we have to be a bit careful, because then sometimes we scare away the landowners and foresters that do very close to nature forestry, that then look into their forest and say, oh, do they mean my forest when they say old growth forests? I think we need to distinguish here. And we need areas that need to go into full protection. National parks, highly protected areas, some of the last jewels of ancient forests that we have, and they're disappearing in Romania. They're disappearing fast. And this is something they call panic logging there. So panic logging means we're trying to do legislation to protect the last hotspots of absolute beauty and absolute biodiversity, and some of the forest companies, landowners, and sometimes even state forest companies like in Romania, Romsil, but then start like in panic to log the areas which they fear that will be under protection otherwise. And so this is an adverse effect of all of this. Unfortunately, we're not towards reaching our goals of the forest strategy. That's just not true. We still have huge eucalyptus plantations. We still have huge clear cuts in Spain and the Basque Country, like all mountains clear cut, again replanted with monocultures. Unfortunately, I sign up to what Kelsey said earlier. Well, precautionary principle and science will not do the job, or is not doing the job sufficiently. Unfortunately, it's the catastrophes that make then the majorities of politicians rethink the strategies. And we see that in more and more countries, but not enough yet to really reach the goals.
I have a question now from Zoltan Kuhn asking, what are the benefits of the EU forest monitoring law for forest owners, and how can it help to eliminate illegal logging, for example, and make effective implementation of other legislation happen? Juha, perhaps you could give me your thoughts on that.
Forest monitoring, yes. So I think that forest monitoring initiative is quite okay if it will be carried out so that we will select only goals on EU level, and then we could have more exact KPIs on national level. How it can benefit a forest owner? No, at the moment I cannot see clear benefits for the forest owner at the moment, no.
Okay. Thank you. Sven, another question. I'm trying to get through as many as possible of our online audience questions. Anna Ventura is asking, what do you think about sustainability and income supported by agroforestry compared with other production systems?
Yes, we're big fans of agroforestry and also food forests. You see that there's a whole trend of people organizing the land in a different way, trying to create multiple income streams, and also like hedging, basically, future income streams. So by diversifying to the extreme, like in a food forest case, or doing it in agroforestry lines of nut trees or other trees that have not only ecological but also a financial incentive, financial benefit. I think that's all very positive. We're also planting a lot of hedges around farmland, together with schools, together with volunteers, with companies. Why? Because it helps the whole erosion question. It helps to bring back habitat and connectivity for important pollinators, for birds, etc., that also then help to create sort of biological control for the farmer. So they are the best ways of bringing back, let's say, old style farming, but maybe in a modern way organized. So still quite efficient, much less dependent on one single crop. It is pluriannual, so it's perennial, if you like, and it gives a very interesting income stream over the years if you have the long-term view. But as some of the speakers already said, not all landowners are, or let's say politicians have that head on with the long-term view, and that's unfortunate. But we as Life Terra, we try to promote as many of those plantings as possible, particularly young farmers and farmers that are in transitioning from, let's say, conventional systems to more regenerative practices. So everything that has to do with hedges, agroforestry, food forest, we will gladly try to support.
Kelsey, I think you wanted to come in on forestry monitoring.
Yes, I just wanted to reflect on what we heard at the beginning of the conversation. Sven and Juha, they monitor their trees, they monitor their forests. Every business wants to know exactly what's going on in their forest, and it's very common practice to be able to know the next step. And I just wanted to give an example because not every forest owner is incredibly well informed. I've run into landowners that don't even know where their land is located. for example. So there's a lot of forest owners out there that don't really know the next steps to take, for example. And there's a company that's called Agresta, based out of Spain. And what they do is they use Copernicus satellites. They can identify where somebody's forest is, and they can offer them management itineraries. So if you say, I want more carbon in my forest, then they can show you the actions to take so that you can increase the carbon that's in your forest. So data is an incredibly powerful tool. We say knowledge is power for a reason. And we see all of these initiatives popping up left, right, and center about how we can manage our forest. And this opportunity is burgeoning. So I would say it's a huge and unknown opportunity for a lot of foresters, and it's a well-known opportunity for many others. So if we're looking to level the playing field for everyone so that we can know what's in our forests and take the options that we would like to take, whether it's for wood production or for environmental conservation, then the data is needed. So I would say it's a massive opportunity for forest owners to be able to freely, provided by the European Union, get information on what's in their backyard.
You wanted to reply to that as well.
Yes, thank you. So I think that in Finland we have so accurate data already that every forest owner has that available. So I think that for Finnish forest owners, it cannot bring any benefit. But of course, I fully recognize that if there are some other countries where this kind of data is not available, then it might bring some added value, of course. But in Finland, we have already so accurate data that we cannot bring any added value by forest monitoring regulation. So that was my point. But maybe there are other countries where the situation is totally different.
Thomas, you wanted to come in on this as well.
No, but actually, Juha said it already. There's a lot of countries in the European Union that do not have a forest monitoring that is even coming close to what we do in Austria or Finland. And so I think for the sake of developing the whole European Union towards a knowledge-based forest management, which we need in times of changing climate, extreme weather, new resilience that is required from our forests, I think we, let's say, further developed countries shouldn't stop others or the European Union to actually develop forest monitoring also for the sake of the whole European Union.
Well, Thomas, I'll ask you a question that probably follows on a little bit from that has been sent in to us from Peter Roberts, who's a senior forest advisor with WWF, asking how do you foresee the way EU will act when member states fail in implementing any of these strategies or indeed legislative requirements relevant for forests?
Well, failing towards the strategy, nothing's going to happen because it's not legislation. The interesting point is what kind of legislation will we have that is then binding for all countries in the European Union? And there we are struggling in the moment to actually get proper legislation going. So unfortunately, I think the consequences of not following a future-proof forest policy will be impacts of catastrophes that we will see. And you know, I mean, I started doing forest policy, well, I'm a forester since 94, so I'm doing forest policy since then. But like as a politician, we have farmers' parliaments in Austria. And when I came first with the proposal that we need to replace the spruce with fir in our value chain, also looking towards forest industry, they were laughing about me. Today, everybody has understood that we need to partially replace spruce with fir, not just, but to make our forests more diverse overall, but also for the wood industry to have fir, because fir is, you know, it's more resilient against storms, it's more resilient against droughts, it's more resilient against the classical bark beetle infections. But now they have understood. But why did they understand? Because in the south of Austria, there's whole regions where the spruce is dying in big numbers. And somebody mentioned it earlier. The effect for the foresters is that we have a masses of bark beetle infected spruce woods on the market. The woods look still nice, but the companies say, well, we're full, we don't want your fresh wood. And it's a huge economical damage also for the forest owners. And this is what comes if we deny looking into the future and deny the data that we have and the advice that we have. And we try to keep on doing what we did last century. But then, you know, climate shows us the way, unfortunately. we could be wiser and follow the forest strategy, but unfortunately it doesn't look good, but there's not going to be any payments or so for the member states because it's not legislation that countries are bound to.
Well, exactly. I'm going to ask a question. Joe Hoagland would like to know from each of you whether you think the EU regulation on deforestation-free supply chains will be postponed again this year. I can probably guess what some of you will say, but Thomas, let's start with you. Yes or no, do we expect that to be postponed again this year?
Well, it has been postponed for this year. There's a major fight back against deforestation regulation, and a very interesting one because it's foresters being sent at the forefront of this battle, complaining that this will cause a lot of bureaucracy and whatever. Look, I'm a forester. The only bureaucracy it causes for me is that I have to mention the piece of land where this wood was harvested on my sales contract. That's it. That's the whole bureaucracy. But it's the big sawmill and very much also my own Austrian, but also Scandinavian ones that are importing big amounts of round logs, and they're importing them from, used to import a lot from Russia, from Belarus. Now stuff comes over, I don't know, Turkey, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. And it's these imports that give forest industry a hard time because then in the future they would need to select the different piles of wood and so on and declare it right. So there's a major pushback against the deforestation regulation, but I must also say that a lot of industries are actually calling on members of the European Parliament and the Commission not to postpone it again. What they were waiting for was the detailed regulations on how actually to comply, and the Commission was absolutely late with this. They only came out with the details of the regulation, which are super important for every company to adopt. They were just coming out with that in autumn 24, and you need to give companies a bit more time to adopt to new regulations than 2 months. So it's also a mistake by the Commission that was triggering this resistance. I hope it's not going to be postponed again because it's also a big part of our duty that we have to the rest of the world. It doesn't make sense if we do climate mitigation here in the European Union, all people in the society, all companies try to mitigate, to reduce emissions, and then we just chop down the Amazon at the other end of the globe. You know, climate knows no borders. If the forest is lost there, all our climate action will not help us here. So I think it's a question of fairness towards other regions of the world, but also fairness towards ourselves, our farmers, our foresters, our population, that we apply comparable standards also to imported products. That's a very important principle. And if we postpone it again, I mean, we're just lying to ourselves, and we're also losing a lot of credibility across the globe. So I hope I have enough allies and we have enough allies not to postpone it again.
Kelsey, your thoughts on this question? If the can is kicked further down the road, what are the implications, and do you think that will happen with this regulation on deforestation-free supply chains?
I think I can be very brief because I think a lot of things were said, but many forestry actors are ready to implement the EU deforestation regulation. And I think the existing delay allows for awareness raising for those that may have needed this additional information that has now been provided by the European Commission. So I won't say yes or no as to what I think is going to happen. I will just simply reply with, I hope not.
Thank you. Sven, can I get your thoughts on that as well, since it was to everyone?
Well, I'm not really qualified to answer this question because I'm in a completely different area of the sector, but I do fully agree with both other speakers that I do hope it's not postponed because it is Europe wants to be a beacon of light in this whole climate strategy. Give an example of what Europe, with all the resources that we have, that we can achieve and be an example for the rest of the world. If we postpone these kind of things purely for economical reasons, I think that's very sad, and it would backfire on us in the long term. So hopefully not postponed.
And Juha, your thoughts on that as well, please.
Yes, so we fully support the goals of EUDR, and we are already ready for EUDR, so I don't expect postponement. So I think that the goals of EUDR are excellent, and of course the implementation guidelines were missing at some point of time, but now we are ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're down to our sort of last 10 minutes or so, and I see we still have a lot of questions coming in from our audience. I'm going to touch on some of the ideas and then come around to each of you to give me your final thoughts. But one question from Jeremy Galen from Bioenergy Europe was asking how adaptation measures like harvesting and replanting more adapted species go together with potential restriction on harvesting. This is under the objectives of the regulation on land use change and forestry. He's asking that. Zoltan Kuhn is also asking whether how the panelists interpret the data from Forest Europe's State of Europe Forest report. 33% of forests include one single species, so he's finding this monoculture rather shocking. Antonio Basilicata is asking whether the US rollback on climate commitments, including more logging, including in old growth strands, weakens the momentum of EU forest strategy goals, I guess, bringing in this global and geopolitical element, and how can the EU keep its ambition in light of these developments? I'm going to come, Kelsey, to you. Feel free to comment on any of those, but give us your main takeaways as we wrap up our conversation.
Yes. So I think one of the things we can take away from the academic reports that have come over the last few years is that how we manage, how we choose to log, that reflects our resilience, our capacity for our ecosystems to recover in the future. So these are two things that are inextricable. A figure that comes to mind when I think about resilience is how large are the impacts that are coming from disturbances, climate change disturbances. And the European Forest Institute did a study, a 70-year average of forest disturbances, and it represented about 43.8 million meters cubed of disturbed timber. But if you look at how much is actually being extracted from the forest through logging, that's more like 500 million. So you have 8% of the overall logging that is being affected by natural disasters. So if we're weighing what needs to be addressed when we're thinking about climate change impacts in the future, it is the way we manage. That is what counts if we want our forests to be more resilient. And so that means we have to address the issue of clear cutting. That means we have to address the issue of relying on native species where it's possible, and having an open scientific debate about the rare cases where we're seeing that certain species are not adapting. But we should not doubt the adaptive capacity of some species to get through very, very tricky climactic situations. We have genetic diversity in many of our species, and if we keep the forest diverse, then we will be able to buffer many of the climate impacts. But that is not the way that we are managing our forests globally across the EU 27. So I would say if we need to prepare for adaptation, we need to prepare to put biodiversity back into our forests, and to then match those forests with wood processing sectors that can deal with all of that diversity. And that is not an easy challenge, but that's hopefully something that all of the speakers today can get behind in terms of a problem to solve over the next decades.
Juha, let me come to you for your closing remarks and find out whether you agreed with Kelsey or not. I know at the beginning you said one size does not fit all. What would you like our audience to take away from you as a key point?
Excellent. So mainly I agree with Kelsey. So maybe few comments. So we have a research project in Finland where we are looking for climate resilient optimum tree species for different zones in Finland. So I think that is very important research project. So we want to have a vision of climate resilient forests in 2100. So we need to build that kind of forest that's will stay alive after 80 years and so. So that is what we are doing in Finland at the moment. And I think that there is no silver bullet. So we should look for best or optimum method for each forest stand. So we need clear cutting, we need definitely continuous cover forestry, etc. We need more tree species, to have more vibrant forests and more protection, etc., etc. So I think that we need all tools in right proportion. So therefore, sometimes I'm a little bit disappointed. Not this discussion, but public discussion that some people are saying that one method is saving the whole world and the whole forestry. It is not so. So I think that we need to count on research studies and act on those bases. Thank you.
Thank you, Juha. I'm glad you're not disappointed by this discussion. Thomas, let me come to you to get your closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. I mean, first of all, on the single species question, I think I referred enough. It's not just an ecological problem, but also an economical problem more and more, because these forests are much less resilient against extreme weather and climate change. A short answer to the bioenergy question. Mixed forests, mixed age forests provide us with a quite high amount of growth per hectare, more than clear-cut forests, by the way, but harvesting is more expensive. So going for closer to nature forestry is not compromising the amount of wood that can be harvested in a forest, rather the opposite. But we have to understand one thing. I mean, we cannot sell one and the same piece of wood 3 times. I think the first goal has to be to produce high value products, so sawn wood, construction wood, and so on. Yes, bioenergy is, if you use it as heat for providing heat, if you can replace fossil fuels, that's always a good thing. But we have to understand that we do not have, I don't know, the amount of biomass to replace coal in German coal-fired power plants. So there needs to be, some limits on where we want to use this raw material. And if we want to replace oil, gas, and coal, mainly coal and oil, when it comes to the production of cosmetics or oils or plastics, also there we will need biogenically grown CO2 chains. So we can't sell the same piece of wood 3 times. We have to keep this into account. And thanks to Kelsey for once again mentioning food processing industry, because at the end of the day, we need to offer markets, and this is what will make foresters also, reconsider their way of running forests. One positive note, and this is also towards Juha, you can hear a forester speaking. Usually foresters are people that think in long term, because if you don't think in long term, you're not a good forester. It's a matter of fact, because forests, they take 60, 80, 100, 120, even 200 years to grow to a full-fledged tree and stem. So a forester needs to think long term, and there, between foresters, there's a good basis actually to talk about these questions. And at the end of the day, forestry is more than commercial wood production. Forestry helps us saving our climate. It also helps us for our regional climate to have well-established forests. It keeps water in the soil. It provides us with good water, and water scarcity is a problem that we have more and more across the European Union. And healthy and vital forests are the best providers of water and retention also of water in terms of flood prevention and all of these questions. The soil is something we need to protect. Soil is the basis of all our production, may it be agriculture or may it be forest. So let's take care for the soil even more than we did before. And last but not least, the resilience towards climate impacts. That's what we see more and more. That's going to be the future ingredient of forestry in the next 30, 40 or 100 years. And this is what we need to plant today or allow to grow today where there's enough seedlings. And you can see this in so many examples. The more diverse a forest is, the quicker it regrows, the quicker it rebuilds after a storm, the more other species take over in drought, the more genetic variety you have, and then different, there's thousands of young trees trying to take over the place of a few. So it's a genetical variety that we have. So all of these are ingredients of a future-proof forest policy, and we need to work on that.
Thank you. And Sven, you opened the discussion today. You also have the final word, which I know is something of a poison chalice, as so much has been said. But give us your key takeaway.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, I was thinking about the last question on, let's say, the American chainsaw politics, as they call it these days. And it reminded me a little bit of when I saw the reaction from the European Union on how within 2 days, when it was clear that the US is pulling back, that we were able to suddenly raise hundreds of billions of euros to support Ukraine. And it reminded me of the COVID times when the crisis was that Europe is at its best when it's facing a strong crisis. So we were able to raise for COVID also hundreds of billions of euros for support and to develop, in this case, medicines and vaccines, etc. So my takeaway or my feeling is always, why don't our politics take climate change not more seriously? And we could easily raise billions of euros for this as well, because we have a lot of companies that are polluting. They know it, they want to contribute, but there's no clear legislative package around it. So I think with the carbon removal and the carbon farming legislation, we have a fantastic opportunity that Europe can lead the way, that we can pay for ecosystem restoration in Europe and be a leader in the world in the fight against climate change.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all four of you for a really insightful discussion. Thank you to our audience for fantastic questions. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to get to them all, but I'm sure this is a conversation we will keep having here at Euractiv. You can find out more information about Euractiv debates on events.euractiv.com or email us at events@euractiv.com. You can also use the hashtag EA Debates on the social media of your choice or follow our new X account at EA Advocacy Lab. I wish you a very good afternoon.